Light, they call that. The cat tried working the socket, wasn't there. He slammed his head against Sagan's hip. Sagan kind of adjusted to keep it going down, and you see Cavendish's brake foot grab his elbow, and he pulls his elbow out like this. So in the video on top, you see Sagan throwing his elbow and Cap going down. Looks like you look at the video, he righted himself and stayed on the bike, but instead of being taken out by Cap. So they lost one of the best sprinters in the world because he went down, and they lost the two-time world champion, one of the most favorite cyclists in the world, out of the race. That's too bad. Yeah, so one guy left to win. Yeah. Boring.
Is drug testing still a thing?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you can't test for genetic modifications.
Yeah.
No, not without a biopsy.
But Armstrong.
Oh, he was blood doping, shit tons of blood doping. Like microdosing testosterone.
All right. Great stuff.
You can run out of your beer.
Do you? Is it 9 yet? I didn't know it started yet.
It did.
No, I'm telling
1 minute ago.
Please.
Oh, it's fine. So you, this is UCI working group discussing the ins and outs of professional cycling. These both say, here's the pen. So like last time, they split these into two. Normally we got 2 sheets per working group, but since we got 2 working groups in here, we got 1 sheet per. This is Mboned. When Tim takes over, it'll be a Pim one. So sign them both if you stay. Start that on that.
Is there a? That is there. I thought they were gonna have a laptop for the main one. This laptop is just for that.
They should do both. Where's the AV guy? He's banned.
Spending, did you update the?
Still have one out.
Did you send me new ones?
You ones, but okay.
That blows.
Is the projector on?
Projector is on. Oh, this projector. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and we catch it one here. No, this one doesn't look like it's on.
Okay.
Blue and solid, it's inside. It said B. Yes. All right. Here comes the smoke.
Hey, Greg. Can you rally it for a meeting taker while I get these last sets of a note taker?
Yes. So, who's up for taking minutes? Love this part. I think Mike should take minutes.
You know, I would be,
It's been a while.
no, it hasn't.
Yeah, it's been a while.
No, it hasn't.
I missed your hand.
It's been a year or two, but I would be happy to do that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's what makes you the man you are.
Exactly, with the English people.
All right, we got it up here now too. It's got good work to it. I like that. All right, what's that?
Okay. One last thing we need to put up here,
Jabber
and
scribe?
yeah, one of those too.
Jabber scribe? Anyone on Jabber? Big, anyone on Jabber?
You share with the group?
Sorry. Anyone on Jabber? Your Jabber scribe? Nobody. Come on, someone. Nobody on Jabber at all. Do we have anybody on Jabber? You see it right there, anyone's there.
Is it up there? No.
We have one guy. So we gotta be up there. I take it right here. I just type right here.
Yeah.
All right, I'll do that. You ready for
Okay.
slides?
I do. I'm uploading the Tim's slides.
Tim just give you the slides this morning?
Updated after a discussion yesterday evening.
Over beer?
Fortunately not.
We did not talk about the working group beer. Or the...
No, we had some beer last night.
Okay. All right. I guess we can commence.
Welcome to Mboned. Welcome to Prague.
Yes. All right, we'll get started. This is Mboned, and we will be followed by PIM. Let's see. Please note the note well. This is the newest note well, fresh off the presses. And here's the agenda. So first we're going to go through working group items with the chairs. Tim and Michael are going to talk about the multicast models draft. They have to get going shortly, so we're going to bring them up very quickly. Hitoshi is going to give us the latest in the M-Trace draft and hackathon update from Jake. And Mike may be talking as well about the Wi-Fi draft. That's a late addition to the agenda. Anybody comments? Agenda bash? Anything? No, he means it. Yeah. All right. So active working group drafts. The M-Trace doc went working group last call last year. Stig gave some great comments. The draft was revved based on the comments. And we have regun another working group last call as a result of the changes to the doc. We would like to have more folks comment on this, more than one comment, at least to say you support it or don't support it. It's been around a while. It's ready, but please comment on list what your thoughts are on that draft. The peering BCP. Tim is the shepherd, and he finished the write-up. There were several nits and textual issues. Percy has just updated that and has sent that off, and so that should be going very quickly.
Is it already in the queue?
No, not yet.
Oh, I
That
thought it
was
already in the queue.
Percy yesterday.
Okay.
Ended up changing it. So I guess Tim, all that's needed is take the new one and tweak your write-up,
I can just adjust the right stuff.
and
So,
it can be fired off.
yeah, to the point, I mean, I thought it was already in the queue. When it's in the queue, if there's nits, revs, or comments from the IETF at large, just revving it, it stays in the queue. It doesn't go back to the working group. So that's just part of the normal process.
There was
Really
a
quick.
quite excessive amount of ID nits, so I put that in the shepherd report, and that's now been fixed.
So you found it just running through the tool?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think Percy had
Yeah.
used to do it now.
All right, other drafts. The multicast models info. No, actually, no, that's the Yang models. And there is the multicast models, which Tim is going to talk about right now, actually, after he signs the blue sheet. So, Tim, you can come on up. We're ready for you.
There's not much room in the box.
There never is, but hold on a second here.
Blue sheet?
It has. It's been
Please do sign the blue sheets.
okay. So I'm just going to talk about this draft that we last discussed in Berlin, which I think was 3 meetings ago. The initial focus of it, next slide, was to just document at a high level multicast service models, discuss use cases and a couple of deployment examples, with a general idea as part of the message, or key part of the message would be to recommend the use of SSM wherever possible. So we got some reasonably positive feedback at IETF 96 about the need to recommend SSM or promote SSM, but to also strip back on a lot of the other text in the document. Things being things, that document's been parked, and Mikhail and I haven't updated it for a year, but we've now got some further vigor to have another go at it. So next slide. And I think what we really want to focus on, what the message was in Berlin, was that we could do with a up-to-date, modern, recent draft that promotes the use of SSM and advocates the use of SSM, and gives current up-to-date thinking as to why that's the case. So you talk about it a lot in the working group, but there's no document that explicitly says that. Some quite old documents, but nothing recent. So that's the proposal. So refocus on case for SSM and to give an appropriate new title to the document rather than whatever it is at the moment. So hopefully that's not too contentious. However, there is, you've thrown me off completely now by a sneaky photo. So hopefully that's not too contentious. Next slide.
Camera shy.
Birthdays are miserable.
So hopefully some of you at the back, if you can't read it, come to the front. Lenny got in touch with Mikhail and I, and Lenny's a co-author on this as well, and said, hey, I've just seen this email on the Internet 2 multicast working group list. There's half a dozen emails there that appeared in the last month or so. The interesting bit of which is that they're reviewing how they're deploying with the new backbone, and what they'd like to do is to say, we don't really need ASM anymore on the backbone. We'd like to get rid of MSDP and all the complexities of running ASM into domain on the backbone. So there's a proposal there in that group that they essentially deprecate the use of ASM into domain. So I think that's something that we could consider also making a statement about in this working group. And I think Lenny had part of the discussion on that thread. You can see the link there. He was saying, well, we can discuss this in the IETF and see what we want to say about that within the IETF. So hence, I think this document, in addition to promoting SSM, could perhaps, if we choose to, say a little bit about, say, killing off, but making it clear that we don't think as well that ASM is something we should be doing at least into domain. Next slide. So the question is, do we want to take IETF action here? Is there something that we want to say? Should we get to the end of the slide, Stig, before comments? You can just lurk. Being employed by Cisco to develop a multicast, you probably don't want multicast deprecated. So. Yeah, so do we want to take IETF action? Do we want to write something up along these lines? And if so, if we are deprecating ASM, is it just the inter-domain case? So probably what we would say. But how would we express that? What language would we use? What would we do? Could we make, I mean, MSDP has only ever been experimental. Do you want to make that historic? But then it's got use within a domain as well. So that's not clear. Certainly what David Farmer, who wrote the email to the Internet 2 list, his drive for it was simply to make multicast simpler to operate on the Internet 2 backbone. And that's something that, with my view in the UK and the Janet network, which is the equivalent of the Internet 2 network in the States, that's something I would certainly sympathize with. But then what about use of ASM on a campus? We should probably, or should we just be saying, well, whatever you do within your own domain, that's up to you. But inter-domain, perhaps we should be looking to make things simpler and just say inter-domain is SSM. And as the chairs have just said, we've also just about to push to the ISG a document that's BCP on how you do inter-domain SSM. So that kind of fits quite well as well. So yeah, we can make our draft essentially a BCP status document promoting SSM. We can note the wording in some of the older documents that give the good reasons for using SSM. But also we probably want to think about appropriate guidance for applications, if you're writing an application, to make it an SSM application rather than an ASM one, and all the associated things like how you would do source discovery, for example. Next. I think there's just a couple more slides. So the other thing is here, if we're going to make some kind of don't use ASM into domain statement for v4, what are we going to do about v6? It's one of the people involved with Stig and Pekka in the creation of embedded RP in the 6net project. It's a bit shame to sort of throw the baby out, so to speak, but I think we have to be fair. If we're going to say don't do inter-domain ASM for v4, we should probably say the same for v6, even if it's relatively simpler to deploy. So we could make the embedded RP RFC historic, or we could just simply use some language that says it's not recommended in uppercase. We need to decide how we're going to express it. There's also Mboned here. We need to decide whether we're going to say anything about that, promote it, or well, we need to think about what we're going to say because it is an important thing now. Also need to think about what's happening right at the edges with RGMP and MLD. I'm one of the co-authors of the IPv6 node requirements update, RC 6434. So in there, we've elevated MLDV2 from a should to a must. We probably, if we're going to do promoting SSM in this document, we probably want to have something in here and make this document BCP that says IGMP v3 is a must for v4 as well. I know the IETF is kind of saying don't do new things with v4, but we can certainly, I believe, make a statement about making IGMP v3 essentially a must for v4 platforms. And then there's the whole issue of how all this fits in with the applications. You know, which applications are dependent on ASM at the moment? If we're going to say don't use ASM interdomain, which kind of aligns with the draft that Percy's finally got out, what are the applications, if any, that are going to be hurt by that? So we probably want some engagement with the art area to have that discussion, I would say. Next slide. So I think that's all the slides. So basically, what do we want to do here? Do we just want to produce a carrot? Do we want to produce a stick? Do we want a carrot and a stick? Do we just focus on promoting interdomain SSM? Do we want to promote SSM everywhere? And in the IETF terms, how do we express that? Is there a lot of musts and recommendeds and not recommendeds in a BCP document? What do we do? Stig.
Stig with us. I could probably give you like 20 comments. I'm not sure where to start.
That's what email is good for.
But at least I'm happy to heavily encourage SSM, but I don't think we should deprecate ASM completely. For like interdomain multicast, like between independent domains, like sort of like on the internet or whatever, I think it's a great idea to say use SSM.
Yeah.
But there are cases where people have, first of all, like intra-domain. There's some use cases for ASM, partly because it allows discovery. And there are cases.
I'm sorry, say that again. For what discovery?
Basically, source discovery. You have applications that need to bootstrap that basically have no knowledge or sources, whatever, when they start up. So especially link local multicast, but sometimes also at least site local multicast, like finding your DHCP server, or there's lots of like custom applications from various vendors where they like light bulbs or whatever, where they need to come up and say, I'm here, where should I,
But these are things we can talk about in the draft.
Yeah. But there are cases also where people have, they're doing inter-domain multicast, but it's actually within sort of like one organization. Or there might be cases where you are an ISP and you are appearing with a content provider. And I would say SSM would be best in that case, but maybe there are some cases where it's hard to move to SSM. But I'm happy to
just
say,
catch on that point. And I think it's an important thing to put in the minutes is we need to identify things where it's hard to use SSM for some reason.
But I'm happy to say use SSM wherever you can. ASM should be an exception. When it comes to embedded RP, I just want to say there are people using embedded RP too, not just on the internet. And there are cases, like I said, where you have multiple domains within one organization where people have used embedded RP or are using embedded RP.
Yeah, so the language could be within an organization rather than within a domain.
Isn't a domain an organization?
It depends a bit whether you talk about, say, like sort of like a management domain, or if you talk more about, say, PIM domains, kind of,
Yeah.
I mean, I have to think about the language, but.
I mean, you might think of a, international corporate enterprise network that's spread across multiple sites.
Yeah, for instance.
Yes, that type of scenario.
And basically, you don't want to have like one single RP for all of your traffic. You might want to say, for this site, I have this RP, this other site, I have another RP, right? But you still want to have reachability throughout your entire organization. Just one more thing. I actually like the idea of discussing these different models that like you have now in the draft. But for each of them, you can give some recommendations and say, this is best for this purpose, only use this if you have to, and things like that.
So to just kind of summarize, you don't want to deprecate ASM altogether. It's valid and reasonable within a domain. Between domains, where do you stand is it just recommend SSM, recommend against ASM, or fully deprecate ASM?
I think I'm happy to say should not use ASM, or
Mhm.
you better only have, you should have a really good reason if you want to use ASM.
Yeah, I'm just not quite sure in the IETF language whether should not and
Yeah.
there's
Never
must
do
not,
this
there's
unless you have
not
to.
recommended in upper case. So we need to figure out what the
We can
language
say
is.
it's not recommended or something like that. But we can explain a little bit how SSM is more secure, easier to manage, and things like that.
And I think most of us in the room would say deprecating ASM completely is the ultra hard Brexit. It's not something you want to do.
Yeah, Jake Holland. Yeah, I wonder if scoured from the earth would be appropriate language. But yeah, RFC 4609, you might want to take a look at informational security. And I believe I've referenced it a few times, makes a recommendation already about not using ASM. So you at least might want to reference it. But yeah, thank you for this work. It's good. And yeah, I look forward to seeing the revisions.
Yeah, I think the idea is to pull together all the previous statements made in past RFCs into something, because that's probably 10 years old now, I would guess, of that sort of vintage.
Yeah,
17.
yeah. But I mean,
17.
Uh,
I think 4600 is probably. Anyway, it's old.
Early
So pulling
2000s.
together all the comments made plus the current thinking into a current document, I think is what we're looking
yeah,
at.
I don't think it references 4609.
Okay, yes,
yet,
so hopefully
though,
someone's
so-
noted that in the minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I can send you a follow-up email
Okay,
with
cool.
a reference to it. And then that must be all.
So Michael Abrams and co-author here. I have talked to people, and I've experienced this myself, that doing intradomain ASM is very brittle and it breaks in weird ways, and it's hard to operate. And I think my main thing here is I want to help those within their organization making this case when someone comes along and say, I need this and I need to do ASM, blah, blah, because product or vendor only supported that or whatever. Then if this document is there, that might help them to say it and go back to the vendor and get them to implement SSM instead. So everybody agree on that goal?
Yeah, and I think the point David Farmer's making is doing this makes it easier for the Internet 2 as an ISP, because they're probably providing RP functionality for some of the campuses that don't run their own. But it also does help the people in the campuses, because it simplifies, hopefully reduces the amount of trouble tickets they're following up because of problems with ASM.
Yeah, because I think sometimes someone comes along with, and like, I must have this, we bought this product already, we always spent this money and it needs ASM to work. Or we're thinking about it and this product is cheaper and it does ASM, blah, blah. So at least give them guidance on this and help in choosing perhaps a different solution, and for implementers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great values that we as a working group can provide is direction, to app developers. Providing that direction years ago, had we done that and made a stronger point about SSM interdomain, maybe we wouldn't have had the propagation of so many SSM unaware applications. So I think that's something that we can provide great value in, is giving clear direction. So that's why I think it's important to not be wishy-washy and say you shouldn't do this unless you do it. I think making a stronger statement of use SSM interdomain or do not use ASM interdomain, as a best practice. I think there's a greater value in that than to just simply say, don't do this unless you have to.
Stigmanas. Yeah, so first of all, I think it's just a good document and we need something like this. And yeah, maybe it should be that strong. I mean, there will always be some people that for some reason might want to use ASM interdomain, but we could still have a very strong message saying you should not. I think the biggest problem is application vendors. The network and the host stacks mostly support IGMP v3 and MLD version 2 today. But lots of applications don't support it, and it's kind of hard for you as an enterprise or ISP, whatever, to go into application managers and say you need to, change your application. And maybe if you have a strong message, that might help make it easier to convince application developers.
Yeah, I just had a quick scan through the agenda for an art area session this week, but I don't see one. But I could contact the ADs, the art area ADs, and see what they think about engaging with that lot.
So, Panel Jansunet, I'm all for deprecating interdomain completely, removing it, shutting it down. I hate it. I mean, half of my bugs from vendors are usually related to multicast. So as little as possible multicast code in the code base would make my life easier.
And just to be clear, you said deprecate it for interdomain or for everything?
The question is what we would actually do to achieve that. It's not about making things like MSDP historic, because that can be used within a site potentially. So I think we need to be clear about what that means. If we can say, if we as a group agree that, how do we express it in the document?
This is Greg, as chair or otherwise. We don't have a police to enforce anything anyway.
Yeah.
So what we do is we make a position, and we can always fall back to that, because people come and ask what to do. Read the doc, it's there. So deprecate interdomain. I mean, I've been on that side since Lenny and I wrote that as a draft back in 2003. And unfortunately, embedded RP took off and things kept growing. Now we're back into this again, and all the same problems exist. And the only resistance I've heard for interdomain was, well, it might be hard. That's not a reason why you don't do the right thing. If there's applications that absolutely require it, let's hear about them. But the only ones I know that absolutely required are really enterprise, like, walled garden applications. We don't see this stuff across the internet at large.
No, I agree.
And the whole idea of have this bidirectional broadcast domain was, a cute idea in '89, and it's not the model that we're trying to pitch today, meeting requirements today.
Yeah.
So there, I've spoken.
Sunny Zhang from ZTE. As far as I know, MSDP is widely used. Maybe it's only in China. I don't know the other country.
Are you saying is or is not widely used?
MSDP is widely used in China, but I don't know the other countries' situation. But so I think that the SSM is important, and the model for SSM is important too, but it will not kill the MSDP or the embedded IP. So I have the same opinion with Stig and Greg. So I think the word recommend is better.
Stig Venas, I actually might support deprecating MSDP. If you deprecate ASM into domain, then you might as well get rid of MSDP as well. We have a solution for Anycast RP with PIM that has been around for maybe 10 years and many implementations, and that's better than MSDP if you want to do Anycast RP within your domain. So I don't really see much use for MSDP.
Yeah. Well, so you say it's better. How's it better? Because it seems like it's the same thing, only a different protocol.
It's better in the sense that you're not trying to, send data packet over TCP as, some MSDP implementation.
But you're sending data packets over PIM registers.
Yeah, but also you don't have to, it's easier to manage it. The Anycast RP thing is a much simpler protocol. It's basically just relaying register messages. You don't have to configure MSDP peerings and policy for your peerings and yeah.
Don't you have to do all those things for PIM?
You have to say what are your other RPs inside your domain, but you and how's that different? It's generally recommended to do static config of RPs. Mm-hmm. And if you do that within your domain, it's not that hard to say on each of your routers or each of the RPs that this is all my Anycast RPs. Mm-hmm. If you want to do ASM intra-domain and you want it to scale, then I would say that NXRP solution with PIM is the simplest thing we got.
So that may be something may not be something we could mention in the document.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't make a, I mean, just, I would maybe disagree. I think it's essentially identical, Anycast with PIM versus Anycast with MSDP. One is sending it over TCP packets and one is sending it over PIM registers, but essentially they're operating in the same way. You configure them roughly the same way, and the fact that you can configure a policy with one and not the other, you can kind of do it with both. But I don't know. I think it's still within the purview of intra-domain, so I don't think it really matters.
I don't know if there is anything procedurally within the IETF and the standardization process when you publish a document as experimental, whether there is a time after which, if it doesn't catch on and get elevated, it should just be killed, or whether there's 20-year-old experimental RFCs out there that have been experimental for 20 years and will be experimental for another 20 years. Well, that's one option we have, but people can still use it even if it's historic, of course.
Okay, sorry, Mike McBride. I missed that last exchange in the notes, so that's just the way it goes. So I just wanted to applaud this effort. It's really good timing. As I mentioned last IETF, for the last year or so, I've been working on some emerging technologies like virtual reality and things like that. And in some cases, they're looking at multicast to do things like, each view you look at in a virtual reality, it's a new SSM group, some kind of weird things. And so there are some new applications that are being used, maybe even autonomous vehicles, I'm not sure, that we are planning to use multicast. The timing may be really quite good, although I don't know if they care about IETF, but it would be good to put this down now so we can at least point it to them.
What's the transport?
What's the
What's the
transport?
layer 2? Where's the end? It said virtual routing.
Virtual reality, sorry,
Virtual reality.
AR/VR. Yeah, not virtual routing. So
And
it's
this
an
is a-
application.
Application from
Yeah.
a central location like data center to multiple viewers.
I've seen Huawei presenting on that on 5G scenarios, for example.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios, and that maybe we even need to do a document on that in this group, actually. But yeah, so there's a lot of different healthcare and all sorts of applications starting to ramp up the use of applications like virtual reality. So anyway, I think it's needed. It's about time.
Great comments, please. Hopefully they make it into the minutes.
Nils Warnke, Deutsche Telekom. We have quite a large IPTV deployment in the network using nowadays SSM, but in the old product also used ASM, and it took us quite some headache to get it out of the network, out of the core at least. And since moving to SSM, the operations department has a much more stable network. So from our perspective, support for deprecation.
So one of the things, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask I'm going to guess the reason you started with ASM was because that's what the application did. And
Yes.
how difficult was it to get an SSM aware application?
The application didn't change. We did a static mapping at the edge in order to get from ASM to SSM.
But yeah, I think the document, we could choose to include guidance on how to migrate from your current ASM position to the holy goodness of SSM.
Yeah, and SSM mapping can play a role there.
So is this still a set-top box problem? Yeah, okay. That's my take as well. Yeah.
It's the old system that will be deprecated
Yep.
at some point.
But there's like the state of set-top boxes is still that they don't really support SSM.
Yeah, but the newer version does support
Okay,
SSM.
So it's improving anyway. Okay. Because that's part of the reason here I would like this document. It gives you another hammer to hit the set-top box the vendors over and to say you need to support SSM, stop doing ASM only.
Well, to be quite precise, it's IGMP version 3 that the new set-top box supports. Yeah. So therefore, there's no need for ASM anymore. So that can be deprecated.
So that's probably the only must we would put in the document, is that hosts must support IGMP v3.
But I mean, we told the secretary, we failed on this so many times, right?
So these customers get, oh, our setup box supports IGMPv3. Now we're done, right? Are you sending S, G joins? What? Right. So it's
You actually need.
Yeah, you're only halfway there.
Huh?
You're only halfway there by supporting IGMPv3.
Yes.
You actually have to use it.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I mean, we can still kind of, write an RFC for wonderful SSM mapping. I mean, we've thought it would go away, so we didn't write one, but
Yeah, we're going to be temporary fix.
Stigvanas, yeah, so I think it might be good to mention SSM mapping. The setup box problem, yeah, it's IGMP version 3, and you want to send S, G joins, but you also need some kind of discovery mechanism, right, where the setup box actually can learn what the source address to join.
Indeed.
So there is some application infrastructure or something you kind of need.
So Michael Abramson, I can tell you one vendor that I had got like an experimental box, and they had a configuration file where you configured the S. And so if you had a program like a channel list, this was a setup box for TV, you could not have SSM with two different sources which had the channels. So it was sourcing the channel. You can only have one because they probably just like slapped this on at a later date. So their actual there was no S in the actual application. They just did the mapping in the device. It's SSM mapping, but in the setup box instead.
Jake Holland, the SDP does support SSM, so you can, I mean, there's a RFC about it. It's not the main SDP one, but yeah.
So we'll just take Torless and
yeah. So maybe instead of having a draft about, SSM mapping, the draft should really be on the scope of where do source addresses come from, right? And then basically the real solution is they come from the application, and the sucking solution is they come from a poor agent managed by, an overpaid network administrator in edge devices, right? So that way, we don't even have a separate document that people may look at as the ultimate truth, but we have a section that's really, just saying this sucks, the other section is better.
should that be part of this effort? Well, I don't know if you know what this effort is because you just walked in,
Yeah,
but or a separate document.
Exactly, because I just walked in, I don't know.
All right. Provide your opinion on the mailing list. So before we move on, one last question. So just by a sign of hands, who would be in favor of the draft saying having strong recommendations to use SSM and not ASM interdomain versus deprecating ASM for interdomain? So just a quick show of hands, a non-binding show of hands, recommending.
I'm sorry, but there is a contradiction here. So what is the
What's
standard?
the difference?
What is the standard for interdomain? I mean, V6, yes, we have embedded RP. We can say that, but for V4, we don't have a standard. You
missed that discussion, but we did
yes,
have
yes.
it that it's, yeah.
That's what we're trying to make. Right? That's what we're trying to codify and document here.
But we already don't have a standard, right?
No.
Because MSDP is experimental. So.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But that could be made historic.
So raise your hand if you think recommendation and leave it at that. Okay. There's a couple of hands, probably 6 or 7 hands. Okay. Probably about 6 or 7 hands or so for strong recommendation. How about for deprecating? Okay. It's roughly the same. So we're about split
7 to
50-50.
5. I think it was 8 to 5 in terms of the first one from here.
Who won? 8 to 5.
8. The first option was 8. The
8.
second option was 5. So it's not
Okay.
exactly convincing.
Okay. And you counted us too, right?
Oh no, I wasn't looking at
Yeah,
you.
so-
Sorry.
We both raised our hands. Yeah.
So it's 7 to 8.
Yeah. So it's about half. There's a,
Chad right there.
yeah. So
The room was split, I think, is the
it
only
was
thing you
rough,
can say.
roughly.
He didn't see us.
Yeah, but we didn't count that diligently. So
almost
it's
as close as
roughly
Brexit.
50-50. So let's take this to the list, but please express opinions on the list.
Right.
And thank you, Tim and Michael. All right, Hitoshi.
entries.
Okay, thank you. So this is, again, the MTRS version 2 is a revision, and the version number is just now 17. Next, please. So the Kelly, so Kelly actually sent a mail to the mailing list that he summarized the changes from the previous version, and he mentioned that he summarized the changes from version 16 to version 17, but actually it's not true. He summarized all modifications from version 15 to 17 actually. So totally he mentioned about changes from the from the 15th version's draft. And this special thanks to Stig, we had lots of comments, and we addressed his comments and revised from 15 to 16 and 16 to 17. So mainly the changes made for editorial, but the clarification is, of course, it's really important. So we can just summarize how we changed from the version 15. So we revised the introduction to clarify the criteria for query and so on. And because we missed sometimes we missed the description about rendezvous point, so we clarify the MTRS support by last hop router or rendezvous point. And also we had some we should clarify that must be a capital must, or that must be capital should. So we had some difficulty to distinguish must and capital should. So we scanned and corrected such kind of deviations, and broadened the description of a circumstance in which a reply may be sent before the MTRS reaches a first hop router. This is actually the clarification for the considerable errors. And also expanded on the clarity description in section 3, which is a packet which describes the packet formats for validating TLVs with the message and for handling valid TLVs. So mainly we clarified the error situation of getting the invalid TLVs. Next, please. And also we collected, this is just a typo. We collected the minimal length requirement in section 3. And also in the forwarding code item in section 3 added an explicit definition of the reserved error code range. And section 4.2, we mentioned the outgoing the meaning of the outgoing interface in the terminology section, but we also clarified in the section 4.2, which is studied from the talk about outgoing interface. And we clarified the steps specified for section 4.2.2. And these changes include clarification of the handling for the admin prohibits forwarding code. Next, please. And in section 4.5, we corrected the description for the number of hops field. Actually, the previous version, the version 15, was not really clear for the elimination of the number of hops. So we specify clearly this kind of a statement. Decreases the number of hops by number of the standard response blocks that were just returned in a reply -1. The -1 is in this expression accounts for the additional standard response block appended by the gateway router. Because if the MTRS query or request is reached to the gateway, which may be a gateway or proxy or NAT box and so on, then this gateway box will reply to the MTRS client, and then he continuously start the new query or this request message toward the sender or rendezvous point. So in that case, the number of hosts must be decreased correctly. So we clearly explain. Actually, we already explained this kind of scenarios, but we didn't mention about how we can just change the number of hops specified in the original header. So we clarified these points and added more specific details and wording corrections in section 8.1 and 8.2. Go to next. So this is a change from 16 to 17. Actually, I already mentioned about these changes from, in the last Mboned meeting. So we didn't, the previous calculation for the query allowable time, the calculation method for the query allowable time was not wrong, but because of the POSIX 2008 recommends the clock get time, so we changed a little bit about the formula for getting the query allowable time. So this colors description was changed from the version 16 to 17. This is looks like a big change, but even though you used the previous query allowable time calculation method, the same result will be given. This is just to support the newer POSIX recommendation. So next. So that's all for all changes from the version 15. So I think we can just start the second working group. Let's go.
Great, thank you, Toshi. Just for background, this draft several years ago was submitted to IESG. It got kicked back, and so it's gone through several revisions, and it's in its second working group last call. The first one, like I said, was last year. What we really need is just comments back from folks in the working group. So please take a look, and at the very least, mention whether you do or do not support the advancement of this. We'd like to get a stronger consensus than just Stig. And with that, Stig.
Stig Venas, just quickly, I think this is, really important. It's been taking way too long. There's implementations of this. We need this for IPv6, and just hope it will be published as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. Speaking of which, would anyone be interested in document shepherding this?
I think Torla said yes.
He raised his eyebrow.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if there is anybody who's ever been interested in becoming a part of the process, document shepherding is an excellent opportunity. So please reach out to Greg or me.
Just to let you know, it's actually very simple. There's a template that you follow. Certain questions have to be answered. And you take it through, make sure the nits are clean, and then you work with the authors and rev while it's in the queue. It's not that tough, but it's a great way to kind of see how the process works.
Great. Thank you, Toshi.
Okay, thank you.
And that second working group last call, I believe, goes through next week. There's another week and a half or so left on that. All right. Jake, if you want to come on up. These are the. Did you revise it? Send me a new document, or is this it?
John got pulled away by a network emergency, so I don't have any updates from him.
Okay. All right. Cool. So just a little background on this. There was in Chicago, you ran a hackathon for SSM, and you ran another hackathon over the weekend. This time with involving Spring and V6. So we asked Jake to talk about how the hackathon went and provide us some feedback.
Yeah, so I've managed to continue working a little bit on the AMT implementation, the one that was open sourced some time ago, 2008 or something, and I extended it with IPv6 support, and
this is the gateway or the relay, or both?
Both. They're working together and doing IP6. Yeah, in fact, I would like to walk back something I said last time about not liking the interfaces on the gateway. I tried to find a better solution, but I'm happier with it now. Anyway, the the Spring part in particular is a more kind of, John's particular network, he wanted to do Spring. So this was just something we could do in the 1-day kind of hackathon scenario to try it out. I'm not sure how generally applicable it will be. I think a better solution longer term is probably beer or something, but the same idea is pretty simple. It's let's see. Go ahead and do the next slide. I'll just This is just since Chicago, I've done a few things in AMT and MC proxy, and those are still just all open source. I think MC proxy is GPL v3 maybe, but the AMT is BSD. Go ahead, next slide.
Can you just mention that you said you added V6 support? What was your experience in adding V6 support as an implementer, adding V6 support to something that had V4 only? Was it a long, arduous process, or a couple hours?
I was hoping for a couple of hours, and it was really more like 2 weeks. Some of that was, had I memorized all the RFCs, I'm sure it would have gone quicker. There were a few surprises that took, somewhere between a few hours and a day each to debug. But perhaps they should not have been surprises. Joins have to have a source address that's link local. Who knew, right? So, there a number of things just along those lines. But it wasn't that bad. So the raw packets also are different in IP4 and V6. So that's another thing to watch out for. You have to you don't get, so the AMT wants you to start with the IP. So the payload of the AMT data contains the packet starting at the IP layer for both V4 and V6. The V4 IP raw socket gives you the IP header. The V6 IP raw socket does not. So this was also a surprise that took some refactoring, but it's all achievable and not that bad.
Might just be good to note some of the things you came across as breadcrumbs for future implementers who need to do the same thing, because I'm not sure there are many other implementations on the vendor side for V6 AMT.
Yeah. Well, right. I'm not sure if it's fixed.
I don't think there are any.
When I tried to configure it in Cisco, I got a syntax error. So I don't know if it's there or not actually right now. I didn't pursue it that hard because I knew I needed this anyway.
And I'll save you the time of trying it in Junos.
Thank you.
It's not there.
But yeah, it's not that bad. It does work fine. It's hack around a little bit of packet formatting. So at the hackathon, it was some setup time. This was the first time I did an AMT gateway relay device on the same node, and that went fine. And then I inserted the sort of shim injector that would, so segment routing. This is a context change a little bit, but you just kind of stick a header in there, and the network can unwrap it, right? And it gets to forward along the path that's chosen. So this was a requirement.
Just a question: when you've got a relay gateway in the same device, the AMT join effectively that comes into that relay doesn't have a relay associated with it. So how did that device know which relay then to send the discovery message to?
So that's in my list of extensions. I think that you want to do the right thing to do, or a way to do it maybe is to do multiple gateways with source filtering, right? So you want to at least that's what I've been thinking. So you want to have in general, you're going to need to have so when you use AMT for replication, you're going to need to have an association between the source, the relay that you need to connect to and the source address, right? In some form.
Right. So if it's at the application side, that can come in the content descriptor, some sort, right? You get source group.
Right, but then you don't get the
relay, but you don't get the relay.
Well, but if you do it that way, you don't get multicast across the network, right? So you then would connect your AMT gateway to the relay associated with that source.
Well, but
from
that's the question
client
is,
side.
where's the association come from, right? If it's at the application layer, when I do the content descriptor offline, out of band, I can get all the information. When I get it inside my routed path, I don't have that capability. What's been done in the past is a DNS entry. We look up at the source and have a DNS entry that shows the relays are associated with that.
Yeah.
That's kind of a universal solution that would work throughout or within a domain. Or, often in demos like this, it's hardwired. You just stick it in and know which relay to go to.
Yeah, so it was hardwired in this demo. What we're doing is publishing a recipe for how to connect to our traffic. We would, I think that a standard to do that would maybe be a fine idea, where, we will say, we will publish a sort of list of source multicast traffic available through relay discoverable with this source IP. So that's the general strategy that we're pursuing. We're inviting.
Just like a static list like that, or will you have it in DNS?
Well, if we could do AMT over DNS, then that would make it easy.
No, that's not what I suggested.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
Just a matter of looking up a given source address or even a group source pair. It can be entered that way, and that you have a relay associated with it, and you get that as a result. And that can be done in the path on a routed device, like that relay gateway combined device you had there.
Sure. Right. And that's where it would belong, whatever the solution is. I think there are several different ones, including static mapping list or we could do a DNS based solution. I think if anybody's interested, that's kind of the easy part, or an easy part, at least for when we're still talking about convince individual networks to connect to our sources, right? So if we end up with any consensus on the best way to do that, then great, we'll go with it. We're very agnostic as to how that works. We just want to get our traffic out there. If we had an Mboned, then we would use it. Failing that, we will hack whatever works. Yeah. So that's kind of, at least that's my position on it. So basically what John wanted is to not run PIM. He had some technical difficulties with it. And he also he didn't think he could get AMT into a CMTS within a few years, but that he could get it in his
relay?
AMT gateway. Yeah, but that he could get it. Yeah. Well, sure, we can go to the next slide. Yeah. But that he could get it within the cable modems. So he has an easier time with those. So that's what we spun up at the hackathon this time. This yellow box on the right side here is the gateway relay node. The idea would be that there's multiple CMTSs in the real network, and each one has a different segment routing header that you would associate with it. Any joins that come from that source IP, the network operator would configure the mapping from remote gateway IP to the appropriate segment routing header, and then you just replicate it once per destination inside the relay, and that's the extra hack that I added. I'm not sure how generally applicable this is. There might be somebody else that would like to do it this way while we're waiting for beer to finish or be deployed. But essentially, I mean, this part of it was, you know, a half day's effort, and it's not, you know, you can clean it up more and make it more efficient. You could spend a couple days on that, but that's again, you know, this is low hanging fruit at this point for kind of achieving this kind of deployment if you want to. And again, you know, from our point of view, really, this is the way we send our traffic. So as long as you can receive it, then we don't care what happens inside your network. So if you want to do it this way, fine. I'll give you the source. But Carlos.
Yeah. So is there an AMT IGMP join being sent from the AMT gateway in the home router?
Yes. So the receiver does a native join. The home router is running. So this was on OpenWRT, and it was running MC proxy with the AMT gateway. That gateway was configured to know the remote relay, right? So, and this is something you can do in the network. You configure the home router to understand what relays it should talk to by source, right? And so that join is configured to talk to this relay, and then this gateway is configured to talk to that relay.
So there must be some trick on how the relay would know how IGMP joins on the same downstream would only need to be sent, I guess, as one copy that magically from the cable modem would be, you know, be able to be intercepted and decapsulated, right?
To inject the shim and to only replicate once per
downstream, yes.
Per downstream, yeah. Yeah, that's the part we added. That was the you know, couple hours effort.
So how do you identify from different home routers in the AMT relay which of them belong to a single downstream?
Lookup table, statically configured lookup table configured here at the relay. So so you have the remote IP address from the gateway. And so this was an extra hack. There's no standard about this, right? And if there's interest, then we could put it. I'm not sure long-term this is the right solution. This is just what he wanted to do to get it deployed.
Well, I mean, in other crappy solutions like this, like option 82, at least we have a signaling. So I'm not sure if it's operationally feasible to create this table, right? So if there is any trick on how the cable modem can insert something that basically, you know, gives this information like this option 82, then you could get rid of this table, right?
Sure, yeah. So that was
because it seems like some lightweight amount of work is possible for the cable modem, right? So let's try to figure out what the best thing is to minimize the administrative work on the relay, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that part again. This is the part that was added, and it was low effort for his specific solution. So if he had wanted a different kind of lookup from remote IP lookup, then that would have been fine. It's just, I think that's just the way that network was laid out.
So this is not UDP AMT encapsulated in downstream. It's still normal AMT in the upstream. It's just this new segment routing header, and then that just basically you strip segment routing, got the native multicast, send it on the downstream.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right. And so we just do it once per destination, even if there's multiple.
Who are these crappy vendors of the CMTS that can't do AMT?
He didn't say. It might be a constraint on upgrading the versions. I'm not really sure. I wish he was here because he assured me he would be, and then yeah. But duty calls, I suppose.
No, I mean, let me know, right? I may be able to help figuring out how we could.
Yeah. Well, I can put you in touch if he can.
Right, so.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'd be willing to pick a different vendor rather than putting this in.
That's what I was implying, right? If that's basically what he has to live with, just rather the brainstorm how we could automate discovering which type of segment routing header to do based on getting rid of the manual mapping table.
Well, again, beer is probably a better choice. It's just not there yet, and he wants to be ready to go whenever, because even if when you have 20,000 downstream, even if you can just do your 50 megs for your favorite 5 channels, this can be significant, right?
I think that depends a lot how close you can put the AMT relay to the CMTS, right?
Yeah.
If it's in the same POP and you've got basically the big 100 gigabit local Ethernet links, and basically maybe it's, and I'm not saying it's good, I'm just saying that, the good enough is often the enemy of the better, and so we should be prepared for dealing with it.
Right, and vice versa. It's faster deployment sometimes is more important. So it really just depends. But again, it's like I said, this is really just a sort of network specific implementation. I think that there are probably better ideas, but
I mean, there aren't that many vendors in that CMTS space, right? And it's basically in the US, right? Okay, so I'm a customer, right? So I'm interested, and basically, all the other MSOs might simply pick up the same solution if it gets multicast, better into these networks, right? So I'm never, just against Hex because of Hex, just because, right? So.
Yeah, fair enough. I will encourage people. I'll try a little harder to encourage people to look for a better answer. Yeah, but this is what we tried out just to make sure it was something that was doable for him. I think he's willing to explore other options. Just this was the one that matched with the way he wanted to do his network anyway. Like, he cares more about IP6 than about multicast at this point, but that may change any day.
But I mean, you can still kind of bring beer in if you tried, for example, to terminate beer one hop before the CMTS, right? If we're basically having to do the workarounds to keep the CMTS simple, the question is, what about the rest of the distribution network, right? I mean, that's what we've typically done in the past as well. And
yeah, part of what drove this was what's already deployed and what is easy for him to deal with today. He doesn't mind running an extra box, but changing versions on his deployed systems is maybe harder, depending. Yeah, thank you. Okay, yeah, next up. Anyway, so the AMT itself, I think is getting to, I wouldn't want to run something on it where I'm on the hook for refunds, but not yet. But with 6 months work, I would definitely. I think that would be fine. With 2 months work, I would probably. This is kind of my list for most useful things to do to it. I think that stability and making sure it's really not just interoperable with the existing solutions, but actually following the spec is the first and most important thing. I'd like to be running multiple gateways to do kind of the source mapping, so that you configure a gateway to talk to a relay and to ignore certain sources. You automate that and hook that up, hook it up to support PIM. I think a high performance forwarding path. I haven't really stressed the performance on this. I mean, if you really need high performance, you can buy the Cisco, unless you need IP6, or maybe by then it will. Obviously at some point you might need the high performance path. That's going to be month and a half, but entirely doable. Certainly right now it's like single threaded lib event based forwarding. So whichever box you're running, whatever that can support is kind of what you're looking at there. But yeah, I think it's a good next step toward being a truly deployable system that can actually meet the needs for hopefully everybody who wants it. And if I get time, I will be working on some of this in the months to come. But that's an if, and may depend on how likely it seems that it will get use. So yeah, any other questions?
Great, thank you for telling us about it. And Any plans for future hackathons?
Yeah, I mean, the hackathon's one of my favorite parts. So, I mean, I always love to take a couple days
This
to.
might not be the last.
It might not be the last.
All right.
I might be skipping a couple. I plan to be busy this year, but as soon as I can, I'll come back and do something.
Right.
I might skip Singapore.
So one last thing, Mike, do you want to come up and talk? And time-wise, you're it. So, and you have the next working group after this. So take as much time as you are willing to take from your own working group. Give yourself the hook.
Yeah, this would be very quick, actually. And sorry, this wasn't something I requested. It was just a last minute thing because of something Alvaro attended this week. So there's a draft that a few of us have in this working group with regards to multicast over Wi-Fi. The draft hasn't been updated for over a year. It's been low on our priorities. We've had other things to do. In this draft, there are things listed of why multicast is a problem over Wi-Fi and why people use unicast instead. Things like low reliability, no acknowledgements, low data rates, and just things like that. My co-author, Charlie, in the meantime, he met with a lot of people in IEEE who've also been working on this problem. And within the internet area, he submitted a draft with some of these guys along the same lines of the draft that we have here, with a few more details of what's going on in the IEEE. So as far as I know right now in IETF, there's 2 documents dealing with multicast over Wi-Fi. And in talking to Lenny, we still think it's good to have that kind of a document here, at least describing the problems. We may or may not.
Remind us what of those 2, what's the difference between those 2 and what working groups those 2 are in?
Yeah, so the differences are, and I'm not sure actually why there's one also in the internet area. The differences are that they took pretty much what we have in our draft and included much more details of what's been discussed with multicast and Wi-Fi in the IEEE, which is where they're defining the Wi-Fi specs. So that's really the difference.
And your doc was considerations, requirements, what?
Problem statement.
Problem statement,
Yeah.
okay.
And so Alvaro, he had a meeting Saturday. I was not able to attend, but just wanted to see what if anything more that you heard.
Sure, Alvaro Rotana, Routing AD. So on Saturday, we had the immense pleasure of spending 7 hours with the IEEE. We have this periodic IESG, IEEE, or IETF, IEEE coordination meeting. And so we discuss whatever, what do we need to coordinate? And so one of the topics that came up was multicast and wireless. And honestly, the session wasn't too well organized. There was one question that was asked. I feel like I should be looking the other way. What should we need? What should we do? And I guess some pointed out, well, multicast sucks on wireless interfaces. And the IEEE said, yep. That's it. Right? So the draft that you're talking about, that Charlie and Dorothy and Juan Carlo and someone else published, talks about some considerations. So you're going to do multicast over 802. These are some things you need to think about. In other words, it doesn't necessarily solve any problems. It just says, well, this is what you're stuck with. Now, the thing is that wireless is not just Wi-Fi, right? It's not just 802.11. And many of us have designed protocols or have assumed that protocols that we designed for Ethernet work on wireless interfaces. Maybe we thought that 802.11, there's other problems with 802.15.4, that the stuff that IoT uses and things like that. Part of the discussion that was kind of interesting was that some of the people that have been working on 6LoW and 6Tish talked about some of the enhancements that they have made at the IP layer to make it better. So instead of waiting and hoping for the IEEE to magically fix all of 802, they said, well, we're just going to go do some things. So, for example, in 6LoW, when 6LoW PAN existed, they did some proxy. They changed neighbor discovery for IPv6. They did some proxying of neighbor discovery now that is helping some of the broadcast traffic that has to go on in there. So one of the suggestions was maybe those things apply to other layers, right? Not just for IoT, right? So what came out of the discussion was there are some specific things that we know don't work and that we should go fix. For example, DAD, duplicate address detection for IPv6. According to the tests that they came up with, about 20% of the time doesn't work. So there's a really high probability that you sit in this room and you get a duplicate address just because it just doesn't work over the wireless interface. There was no specific answer. What we came out of the meeting with is, yes, we need to coordinate better between the IEEE and the IETF, but no one said, yep, we're going to go fix 802. And maybe 802 is not what's working. What's broken, maybe we made the wrong assumptions. And so, right now we're sort of at this impasse. Maybe we made bad assumptions. Maybe they made bad assumptions. Maybe we both didn't understand what we were doing. I don't know. So what we do want to do is, there's a problem statement that you wrote. There's some considerations, but, we can go back and forth forever, or we can actually do something. So one of the things that we wanted to do out of that meeting is, get some people together. I don't necessarily want to call it a design team, but, get some people together to actually work and talk about solutions, to go look at the solutions that exist in the IoT, 802.15.4 part of the world, to get other people that do radio stuff, that maybe understand how the radios and the wireless stuff work better, and you guys that understand multicast needs and broadcast and stuff like that better, and figure out what can we do. The things we need to do, are we just doomed with 802 stuff, or is there something that we can do to progress this, and not just have me and other people sit for 7 hours looking at IEEE people and pointing the finger back and forth, because we're just not going to go anywhere with that. So there's some people that were at that meeting that work in the IETF as well that are interested in working, that I don't see here, but that could collaborate with some of you guys. And again, I don't want to necessarily call this a design team, but if you want, I can get you guys together and do introductions, and we can go from there.
Carlos Bernardos, UC3M. Just to comment that we presented last IETF, in internet area, also experimental work that a colleague of mine did on 11AA, evaluating how multicast, the different solutions work in a testbed with up to 30 nodes, I think. So these guys, I'm not involved in that work, but these guys are willing to work in any effort, like evaluating any solution over that testbed that is available. So in case you want to check, that that's available for that.
Sure, that's great. Alberto again. So send me an email, like now, if you really want to do something like this, and maybe in the next couple of hours I can set something up to get some of you guys together at a break or something, and then you go do what you go do. Sounds good? Yes. Thank you.
Jake Holland, were there a list of solutions that you talked about or tried, or is that written somewhere?
Alberto Rutana again. So the minutes, I was just looking at them, unfortunately say nothing. The guys that have been working on 802.15.4 in 6Tish and 6LoW, yes, there's a couple of RFC or drafts they've been looking at, they've been working on. So we can get those. One of the things that they also mentioned that the IETF guys working on that mentioned, as well as that they thought that this could be applicable in other places, not just 15.4, but 802.11 or something else. And that it would be good for them to get more feedback as well. right? Because it could be applicable. It could be that you guys look at it and say, well, that works for 54, but if you tweak this, it might work for other networks as well. So no, but I can find out what those are.
Carlos Bernardo's again, and I think that I fix it later. I think that in the other draft that you mentioned, there are some, I don't know, solution, but that's some consideration, I think, from what I recall, on how to configure different things, different IP protocols to better work in wireless, but I'm not completely sure.
Great, thanks, Mike and Alvaro.
Yeah, so just to conclude, with regards to what needs to happen in Mboned, I think those discussions probably would be best to happen, but I still foresee a need for the draft that we already have here that's been accepted as working group to be brought back to life, to be updated. Tor has made some comments previously about what need to be added, so I'll commit to do that finally, and then we'll go from there.
Great, look forward to that work. Okay, any other comments, statements? All right, with that, Mboned is done. We'll see you in Singapore, and it's time for PIM. Yeah. And now these are blue sheets for PIM. Please sign them. This is a separate working group meeting, so don't assume that you just signed Mboned, so you don't need to sign these. Please make sure you've signed both.
Okay.
Excellent.
Is this your adapter? Yes. Okay. Not sure if they actually provided one. No. Yeah, I can all see my email.
Yeah. So welcome to PIM, everyone. If you need some note taker, we would often use the same one, I think, for both Mboned and PIM, but you need someone else. You think you can do it?
Yeah, actually can do it. I'll just keep it going.
Okay, Mike is scribing. Anyone want to do Jabber? Okay, thanks, because I Jabber scribe. Okay, thanks, let's get started. So this is, PIM working group meeting. Please sign the blue sheets again, the PIM ones. This is the note well, it's the same as you saw earlier in the Mboned session. And this is the agenda. Any comments on the agenda? Does it look okay? All right, so I'll talk a little bit about the working group status. We have a PIM Yang model that we requested publication of in March. I don't think much has happened to that. It's in the publication queue. There's some new proposal, and it's maybe more than a proposal for how to do configuration state, intended configuration state versus operational configuration state. So one question is whether the PIM model should be updated to follow that. That's something we need to discuss, I think, with our AD, and it depends on whether other Yang models for routing, like interface model and other things, will be updated to use that. There's the source discovery draft that is in the publication requested queue now. There's explicit tracking draft that has been more or less dead for a couple of years. Hoping maybe we can make some progress with that. There's only some minor changes, I think, that are needed for the PIM explicit tracking. Yeah, since you are here, Hitachi, are you planning to update this, or?
Yes, yes. Actually, just I need to say sorry for the delayed response, but actually, according to the previous discussion, mainly raised by Avalo, our AD, we changed the intended status from the proposed standard to experimental draft. So the several or many something like tone for the explaining some function or providing some guidelines should be changed. And actually, you have been now talking with one Cisco guy, and he is now interested in changing something like tone to suit the experimental documentation. So we will revise the draft soon, and maybe, and I hope next IETF meeting I can present a revised draft.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, another working group draft is the multiple upstream requirements. That has been kind of not updated in a little while, but there's a new update now, and we'll talk about that later this meeting. We also had a draft on DR load balancing that we requested publication of, I think 3 years ago. And Aliyah, that was the AD back then, she had multiple comments and issues with the draft, and the authors didn't update the draft, so it kind of died. But there's a new revision now. The authors want to get this done, and there's a new revision that was just posted. So we should probably maybe next meeting have some presentation of that, what changes have been made, and see if the working group is still interested in getting that published. So probably have to do another last call and so on. Well, first of all, see if there's interest, and if there's interest, discuss the changes, and then do a new last call if we agree that this is something we want to do. But yeah, if you like, have a look at the last version and see what you think. We also have a DR improvement draft. So there's no update now, but I know there are some ideas and thoughts about some changes to go in there and some plans to update it before the next IETF. So we'll probably discuss it in Singapore. Yeah, thanks. And then today we will talk about the IGMP MLD Yang model. And we have an MSDP Yang model that I think is more or less done, but we need people to review it. So please go and look at the model, see if it makes sense. If you're a vendor, does it match your implementations? Are you able to support it? If you're a provider, ISP, does it allow what you need to configure and monitor and manage MSDP? And we'll probably ask on the mailing list some time after this meeting to see if people are okay with our working group last call. If you have any comments on that right now, please, you're welcome to come up to the mic. But otherwise, we'll just check on the list. So that's the status. Any comments or questions? All right. Okay, I think we'll start with the first presentation then, which is the multiple uplink requirements. Multiple upstream, not uplink.
Okay, my name is Carlos Bernardos from University Carlos III Madrid. First of all, apologies for not having updated the draft for a while. So I will, next slide please. Just to remind a bit the goals of the document, the purpose is to define the functionality that IGMP NLD proxy with multiple upstream interfaces should support for in different scenarios, and actually also document those scenarios where this MLD IGMP proximal with multiple upstream interfaces are required. So the content of the draft is basically a problem statement. So why do we need to document this? To support proxy with multiple upstream interfaces, some scenarios of applicability. We will see more about that in the next slide. Then requirements extracted from those applicability scenarios that this upstream with this proxy with multiple upstream interfaces should support, and some security considerations. Next slide, please. So we cover different scenarios of applicability in the document. I will not go into all the details, but just list those in the slide. For example, multicast wholesale offer for residential services, where you have, for example, the incumbent operator and alternative operators, providers, and how to could use a proxy with multiple upstream interfaces, and what are the requirements imposed by this scenario. We have also the scenario for multicast resiliency, where you may want to have multiple providers and have multiple upstream interfaces and use those to provide additional resiliency. You may do the same for load balancing to reduce the load on the metro network by having multiple interfaces, and so on and so forth. And we also consider in all these scenarios, we have consideration for fixed and mobile networks. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, on all these scenarios, we try to identify requirements. The details are in the document, but here in the table, we just summarize for each of the scenarios that are covered in the draft, the different requirements and impact that it may have, or those may have, for the multiple upstream interfaces support for the proxy. Next one, please. So this is just a summary of the story of the document. The key point is that in this revision, we address the comments that we received from the previous version. Basically, the most critical one was adding some text or consideration on SSM, ASM impact for the different scenarios, as well as some other things that we fixed. So we believe that the document is ready in the sense of doing the job of identifying the requirements. Of course, then there will be the need for the solution document to work on that, but that will be a different document for the working group to work on. So we believe that the document is ready, and what we think we could do is to get some, or that we will benefit from having is additional reviews from people in the working group. I don't know, it's a part of working group last call or before. That's up to the working group to decide. But we believe that the document is ready for making progress. So any question or comments?
How many people have read this draft? Can you raise your hand if you read this version, or maybe even a recent version of the draft? Yeah, the multiple uplink draft. How many people have read that? I see like 3 people have read it, perhaps. Oh, plus, well, myself and us. Okay, 6 people. All the authors have read the draft. All right. So Yeah, since you read it, do you think it might be ready for last call, or do you feel there's a need for some additional work before that? At least for me as a working group participant, it seems pretty complete, and I can't think of anything in particular to add. So, right. So for last call. Yeah. How many people support doing a last call at this point?
Sorry, Jake Holland. I mean, there's like a couple of, ionic considerations to be completed, right? I mean, there's a couple like obvious standards. Are you going to rev it and then last call, or you need a feedback round? I guess
the question is whether, there's like fairly big changes needed, or if it's
Yeah,
more minor stuff.
Okay. Yeah, support minor.
Yeah. So I think we can do that as part of the last call, and if that seems reasonable. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks. So we'll do a last call after this meeting. But yeah, it's great that at least some people read it, and looking forward to getting some comments. Our last calls are usually way too quiet on the mailing list. So. All right.
We should probably do due diligence and ask if anybody feels it's not ready for last call.
Yeah.
Just to be fair.
Yeah.
Okay, no hands.
Yeah, you're right. We should ask that. Of course, if you do a last call and people say, "Oh, this is not ready at all," then we'll listen to that too. But yeah, so let's see. The next one is the IGMP MLD Yang.
Hello, I'm Liu Yixun from Huawei. I represent the multicast Yang design team to introduce the updating information for the IGMP and MLD Yang model.
Yeah, I'm an issue with my PowerPoint. I need to restart it. It looks like. Okay.
Okay. That's the word for the working group document for the IGMP and MLD Yang model draft. And the draft have been reviewed by the Yang doctor, and this version by the working group chair, Stig, updating according to the review comments. And it has passed the validations. Next. Okay. The first updating for the 3 levels for the configuration. The first level is the global level. Global level, that means the IGMP and MLD attributes for the entire routing system. It is not running on the interface. It's only for the instance or the whole system, like the max entries or max groups. It's only a few parameters. So then the second level is the interface global. Interface global means that is applicable to all of the interface, and the interface has no configuration of specific interface configuration. It is not easy to explain, and that I give an example for that. If you in the interface global level, we have configured a parameter like a query interval with the 200 seconds. And if we have 3 interfaces, and the E1, E2, and E3, if on E1 we have configured the query interval with the 100 seconds, and the actual running states for the parameter on the E1, the IGMP query interval is 100 seconds, and the E2 and the E3 both has used the global query interval. That is the 200 seconds. And the third level is the interface level. Interface level means the specific to the given interface. It's only running on the specific interface. And the interface level has some different range from the interface global level. For example, that is the group policy or verify source subnet or the immediate leave. Next. The other updating information about this, one is the we have some common parameters for both the IGMP and MLD, and the description only including the IGMP. So this version we add the description for the MLD, and the other is the protocol version is different from the IGMP and MLD. So we move from the common parameter to the separate definition. In the slide we can see for the IGMP, and the version range is 1, 2, 3, and for the MLD the version is only 1 and 2. Okay. Other updating information for the revised description, detailed errors. Next. So we want to apply to the working group list call. Okay. And any more comments?
Yeah, so I have one question. There's been a couple of presentations I've seen this IETF for some new way of dealing with configuration status, as I mentioned, and intended state and what the actual state is. So I'm wondering a little bit, and maybe Alvaro can comment on that, but is there a plan to update all the IETF like routing Yang models to support that? And the question is, should we spend time on updating this to follow that? And will the documents that we, the models that we rely on as well, if those will be updated shortly?
Alvaro Rotana, routing ID. So there was a statement that was put out a few weeks ago that all of you should have read, but I didn't memorize. But the statement talks about, yes, how should the drafts be published with respect to the different states. I forget all the names. I've been trying to stay as far away from the Yang politics as possible. And yes, I think in the statement it suggests that all models, when possible, should be updated to the format. I think it's called the NMDC format. So it should be updated to that. It does mention, I think, a couple of cases where the model has been done, is deployed, operationally, all stuff that maybe it's not worth changing. But that's pretty much the big exception. If you want to, I can dig that up and send it to the list just to make sure that everyone sees it. I believe it went to the whole routing area, but it may have gone not to the working group list, to some other list somewhere. I'm sure the chairs probably have it somewhere. If you don't, I can look it up.
Yeah, I was trying to see if I could display something here, but anyway, there is this guidelines for Yang models offers to the using the new network management data store.
Yes.
Architecture. So there's a draft on that, and yeah, if you can forward that email, that would be
good. So, I'll look for it.
And I guess the other question is also if we should do that to the PIM model. I guess that might make sense. I mean, that's already, you know, we already requested that published, but I guess nothing has happened since we asked for that, right?
So let me, because that's in my queue, let me figure that out with the Yang doctors and figure out, with the Yang doctors, figure out what they want us to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me
Okay,
take that
sure,
action.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So for this draft, we'll put it back here. Yeah. So any other comments on the draft? Should we consider last call? I guess we should try to figure out whether we need to make this other changes. But are there other issues you see? Is it more or less ready for last call, or do people think there's something that needs to be done, changed? Should we ask for hands? So maybe we just need to wait. Yeah.
Maybe we should, because I think even if changes are need to be made, we already have
Yeah.
show support.
Yeah. Okay, so apart from the issue we just discussed, we need to resolve that. Do you think the draft is ready for last call? Raise your hand if you think we should do a last call once we resolve the issue with the configuration data store. Yeah, I think 4 and 5. Yeah. Yeah, I should also add, there's this design team with people from multiple vendors, and I assume that they all are happy for it to go to last call.
The Yang doctors are happy?
Yeah, it has been
Yeah,
reviewed by the Yang doctors. If you don't think it's ready for last call, can you raise your hand? Okay, no one against. So, all right, so we'll see what Alvaro says, and what info he comes back with, and we'll have some discussion on the list about the configuration model, and and the goal should be to revise the draft if necessary and do a last call before the next IETF.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because our draft depend on the routing, IETF routing, and the IETF interface Yang model.
Yeah.
So they should be revised first, and we follow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, in general, I've been hearing that people want IETF models as quickly as possible, else people will start using non-IETF models. So hoping that this can happen pretty quick.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Then we'll move on to the other Yang model.
Yeah, next. It's also me. Okay. Next, I will represent the multicast Yang design team to introduce the IDMP and MLD snooping Yang model. This is the first time to give the presentation here.
Sorry, can I just ask one question? So I see in the draft there's only one offer, but all of those people worked on the draft, or?
Yeah. The draft has not updated.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Not updated in time.
Okay, I see. Okay, sure.
Okay. So, this version, the structure for the IDMP and MLD snooping Yang model according to the IDMP and MLD model. So we will have the agreement with the whole structure just now. So the draft we need to update after the meeting. So the effort from the multicast Yang design team, from the Ericsson, Jabra, and Huawei and Cisco, we want more vendors or carriers involved. Next. This is the whole structure for the IDMP and MLD snooping Yang model. This is the example for the HMP snooping. MRD snooping is the same. It's just the IP address is different. The HMP snooping young model, just for now, we get the agreement that we use the IGMP snooping profile style to run the model, and it includes the global parameters like the formatting mode, explicit tracking, and the static group, and some operation or in state is not incomplete. It's just for example here is some group and source information. So the profile we reference to the IEEE bridge model. The model. So we use the model from the profile style, which can probably use in the VLAN or bridge domain. So the process can be fully independently defined and can be augmented, and can be references and from other models easily. And for adjusted to the bridge domain or the VLAN, but we have not discussed for the VSI or EVP instance. So that's the RPC for the item snooping. For now, we only define the clear the item snooping groups. So next, there's some problem we design team should to go on. And the one is the how to extend the IGMP snooping profile style the model to support VPRS or EVPN, and the second is how to define the operational date. So next we wanted to involve more vendors and carriers, and need more comments. That's all.
What vendors and carriers are currently involved in the draft?
Ericsson, Huawei, and Cisco.
Okay, that's pretty good.
There was one other you mentioned too, I think. JBL.
JBL and Cisco.
Okay.
No.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, just like the other models, it's really important that people look at this, because else, if you're a vendor, some customer might come and say, "Oh, we want you to support this RFC," but if you don't, if your implementation doesn't cover all, say, like mandatory things in the model, you will have a problem to support it. And of course, ultimately, this is for people to manage the devices, so they need to contain what info people actually need to get. So I think that's important. It's important that everyone has a look at this. And have you thought about supporting, as it says, IGMP snooping? Have you thought about IGMP proxying? Will it cover that, or would there maybe be some additional things needed to support that? Or?
Okay, IGMP proxy, a separate document or in this document?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I haven't thought about it. I'm wondering, will a snooping draft more or less automatically do what you need for proxying as well, or I'm not sure. Something to think about. There's also some interest from Broadcast Forum in doing a snipping model, I think. You know, there was some discussion on the PIM mailing list. So, and they also had some model, I think, that they proposed. So maybe it's good to compare the models. I don't know if you have done that, but. So yeah, I guess at this point you're still working and trying to agree on some of these things in the design team.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Are you interested in adoption now, or it's too early to consider adoption?
I think it's not ready
Yeah.
for adoption.
So I think we should just encourage people to look at the model and provide comments on the list. And if you're interested, you're also welcome to join the design team. It's anyone from the IETF or anywhere that is interested in working on these models. So
We have a meeting on every Monday night, on Monday evening for the Beijing time. Yeah.
yeah, some either early mornings or late nights. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. So please, if you have comments now, that would be great. Otherwise, please have a look at the draft and see what you think. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
So I think it's just moving. Final. I think so. Just make sure I don't forget anyone. Okay. Oops, that's the wrong draft. Yeah, I can. No, okay, yeah, great. If you can do that. Yeah. Thanks. All right, so this is about PIM with IPv4 prefix over IPv6 next hop. It was presented last time by Ashutosh Gupta. He could not be here today. He's the main author of this, but I've been involved a little bit myself, and I'll do the update this time. Next slide, please. And I might, yeah, actually, I want to skip this one for now. Let's go to this. All right, so so with multicast, with PIM, but multicast in general, we care about RPF. And when you want to send a PIM join, you need to do RPF to find out what is the next hop towards the source or the RP. And with PIM version 4, you need to send an IPv4 PIM join, and it has to be sent to an IPv4 destination. So you need to find your IPv4 next hop to send that join. The problem, though, is there are people that are deploying this thing, this RFC 5549, where they basically use IPv6 BGP to do both v4 and v6. They don't want to have separate peerings for both v4 and v6. So it's sort of having a single control plane for both v4 and v6 routing. And this works pretty fine for unicast, but for multicast or PIM in particular, the problem is if the next hop is a v6 address, how do we find out what v4 destination to send a PIM join to? If there's only one PIM neighbor, we can kind of say, okay, hopefully that's the guy we should send a join to. That's maybe not that great, but it's possible. If there's more neighbors, we need to have some way of resolving this. And the previous draft mentioned like 3-4 alternatives, and based on the discussion last IETF, we concluded on this one simple solution, which is to use the address list option, which already is in 4601 and the new PIM sparse mode spec, the standard. But in the spec, it says that basically you assume that the address list has the same address family as the PIM message normally, and in the RFC it says it should be the same family.
And people have been using this, implementing this for IPv6. Just basically, the problem is you need to send a PIM join to the primary address, like a link local address or your next hop. But sometimes people have a static route, so where the next hop is, say, a global address. And we use for v6, we use the address list option for a device to say, here are my other addresses. So if your RPF resolves to one of those, you know which link local address to send the join to. And we figured we can use the same mechanism in this case. So basically, a v4 device would send the address list option in a v4 hello and saying, here are all my v6 addresses. So if the next hop is one of those v6 addresses, then you know what the v4 address is. So in a way, it's the exact same mechanism as is standardized already. It's just that we are kind of crossing address families. I think I'll go back to the first slide then. So this one, yeah, thanks. So basically, if you look at this topology, you have a multicast host with address 5555 to the far left, behind R1. And let's say R2 should send a PIM join to, well, towards S, G, towards 5555. So it needs to look up the RPF. And in this case, there's both v4 and v6 deployed. We have a v4 address and a v6 address for R1. 1 colon 1 and 1 1 1 1. So we kind of want, if we do a RPF lookup using the routing we got from the BGP v6, whatever the RFC number is, you will get a v6 next hop for 5555. Basically, it will say it's like 1 colon 1. But we need to resolve this to 1111 somehow. So the idea is if R1 sends a hello and saying, here are my v6 addresses, we would see that, oh, 1 colon 1 is one of those. So then we know that the actual PIM neighbor to send a join to is 1111. All right, any questions so far? Okay, then I guess go forward 2 slides. Okay, so I sort of already mentioned this. So basically using the address list option that already is standardized. And the way we use it is as before, except we are crossing address families. That's the main problem. Next slide. And yeah, this has already been deployed or implemented and deployed by at least one Cisco customer. And we're looking for adoption. And it can maybe be just an informational document saying this is something you might do. The one problem though is the PIM RFC says 4601 and also the new Internet Standard Draft says that the secondary neighbor addresses should be of the same family as the primary address.
Thomas Eckert. So is the join for the v4 stuff then still an IPv4 PIM multicast packet?
Yeah. The only problem is that we only get the v6 next hop from the routing.
Okay. Well, you know, I was just wondering if do we have, so there is no interest to only have a single address family PIM adjacency?
Maybe there could be, but at least as far as I know from these deployments, there is both v4 and v6 configured on the router interfaces. But I see what you say though. I mean, if you just wanted to transport v4 multicast, maybe you could still use v6 for PIM signaling to receive v4 multicast.
So the address extension stuff is in the PIM v4 hello or in the PIM v6 hello?
It doesn't say, it's not specific to a family. In the RFC, it just says that there is a hello where you can list, you know, additional addresses.
Okay.
But it says that the address family of those addresses should be the same as the address of the hello itself.
So if we wanted to try to, you know, go the same direction as I guess, the unicast signaling is, which is kind of trying to converge on everything over V6, then I think the minimum recommendation should be that that V4 mapping is the hello option in the V6 PIM hello, right? Because, for example, one other logical next step would be, let's say, what is my preferred solution to transport the PIM messages? So maybe we don't care about PIM anymore, but let's say we just built a V6 port connection. And in that V6 port, we would also say, yeah, you can still send joins for crappy V4 traffic, but kind of making, you know, more V4 just like a service that I can easily get rid of than in the V6 transport.
So I think what you're partly saying is then also that you could send a V6, or you could send a PIM join that has a V6 address, destination address, like in the IP header, but it might contain V4 addresses, like V4 S,
And I would only, for example, build a single TCP connection, right? I mean, one of the problems of, I mean, yes, we haven't made, I think, a lot of deployment progress with a port because people may not understand the benefit. But given how it's, you know, about the fast convergence in a reliable fashion, especially when you have a lot of TV programs and they fail over, then definitely it would be useful not to have, you know, two competing connections, one for V6, one for V4, but basically have that in a single TCP connection, and you can also prioritize your V6 joins over your V4 joins, right? So kind of getting into that V6 direction, you know, somewhat further. I think within this draft, the minimum I'd say is that, you know, prefer doing that option V6 so that we can, you know, get rid of V4 and considering something like next step being V4 and V6 in V6 port. So logic, just, you know.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, there's also people that are trying to deploy V6 only in their core networks. But they might still want to actually deliver before payload. So yeah, that could be useful.
Yeah, I'm just saying, right? I think it's the first step is trying to make the control plane, you know, V6 only, and V4 more like a service in that V6 transport plane, right? Getting rid of the native V4 multicast packets, that's a different challenge, right? I mean, that we've looked into other solutions, but that seems to be a little bit more work and not necessarily.
Yeah. One thing though, I would say, I would prefer, you know, as an offer of this, I would prefer to just have this like a separate thing. It's just another use of an existing option, so it's a fairly simple document and easy thing to do. But to do what you said, you know, with using say a V6 PIM join to ask for V4 traffic, whatever, that needs to, you know, revise the PIM spec because it says that it must be the same address family.
Well, you know, I can see an author's wish to be as simple as possible and leave all the options up to the implementations. I'd just love to see even protocol drafts to be, you know, preferring in their recommendations what we would consider to be the best operational practices. And I think that would be to have the hello option in the V6 PIM.
Any other comments? I don't know whether I should ask this as an offer or maybe it's something that chairs should consider, but as an offer, I would like some guidance, maybe whether, yeah, it's worth trying to, you know, see if the working group wants to just do this or if we should, you know, make it like a bigger effort. I don't know.
Okay, so how many people have read this draft by the show of hands? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 4.
4.5, and myself.
Okay, and so we need more people to read it, but I guess of those 4 that have read it, aside from Stig, is this a work that you think that we should be doing here in this working group? And go as far as adopting this into our working group? Show your hands if you think it is. Okay, so we got 4 hands. Okay, so who thinks that this should not be something we work on in this working group? Okay, so that's a good sign, Stig. I'll take it to the list and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I would maybe want to know though, do people think it's interesting to look into what Torles commented on, about how can we use, say, V6P joins to basically join V4 multicast or?
Most of my comments didn't necessarily have to go in this draft, right? It was just kind of this type of, dual plane, where do we want to go, right? I think that's a good thing to think about, but maybe also in Mboned, and I was thinking the minimum thing we could do in this one, which might be sufficient for this document, would be to put the preference in there that, by default, the address, the V4 addresses should be in the PIM V6. I think that was the only impact to this draft. The other stuff, I think, goes beyond this draft and, raises the operational question, where do we want to go with the signal?
All right, so maybe I should just, I'm going to ask another question as the chair, but I'll sit down before I do that.
Okay.
So thanks. All right. So as an offer, I was wondering about adoption, but I don't know if you're ready to do that yet.
It looks like from the group that we kind of are.
So when I check on the list. Okay, thanks.
Okay, yeah, so speaking as a chair, I think also it could be interesting to look into what Torles mentioned, and maybe it's something worth discussing in Mboned as well to see whether people that deploy multicast, whether it's useful to kind of do before multicast with V6 signaling and so on. Maybe talk to a few ISPs and see if they are considering deploying anything like that or not. Okay. I guess we're done then.
Has everybody signed the blue sheets? Raise your hand if you haven't. All right, I think we're done. Thank you. We're done.
All right, thanks. See you in Singapore, and we'll do a joint meeting with Mboned, I expect next time too.
Oh,
yeah, we need to make sure we get the blue sheets. I know, maybe we need to sign up on the blue sheets.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not sure if I usually do that.
We should have a new draft for next working group as well, so we'll start contributing another draft, which is good.
What area or topic?
It's, go ahead. Go ahead. Hey. Yes, actually, I'll be in next week for a day or two, but I think I don't measure stuff at
Okay.
And I've been labeled that to San Diego. RC is over.
Oh, no, I mean, once
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking there must be a lot of overlap, but I think proxying might require some additional configuration or something maybe.
We're gonna have it on Wednesday.
Yeah, but yeah, I think like this VPLS document talked about proxying as well. So, no, that's fine. I just, I'm not sure myself. I have to think about what the difference might be. But,
Big part of my area. Etsy's NEC is looking at IETF. Pretty much every SDL. IETF is not.
yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say about it. We can talk a few minutes during some break.
Without IETF, it's very nice for us because we can